Go.
All right, well, we're live now. I'm Matthew Mugno here with Steven Pappas. He is a QU guy just like myself from that North Jersey region. And I just wanted to really chop it up with you on an afternoon where there wasn't a lot going on because it feels like this is a time that we can settle in and just talk about the last 2 weeks because it's been crazy. So, Steve, first I want you to talk about New York Rangers radio because I definitely want to plug you on that. It's one of the few all live shows that's out there right now for Rangers media. And then obviously I want to dive into the talk. But first, I want to hear about your experience creating New York Rangers radio with Brendan.
Yeah, it just kind of came up this summer. I was looking for some sort of podcasting live show thing to do, and lo and behold, Brendan and Zach were kind of in the same route. They were trying to find something new. I believe it was like July or August. We kind of came together, hashed this idea out, ended up on Rangers Radio, realizing that maybe we have to change the name at some point if we want to make money on it, because I don't think we can make money off the Rangers name. But for the time being, I love doing stuff live, do it for a living, so it's nothing I'm not used to. But just to be able to kind of interact with people as they're, as the show's going on is my favorite part, because you get some wild comments, like all the stuff you'll see on Twitter. It's, everybody's kind of, you don't really get a chance to respond right away. But if it's in your live show, you got to be quick to it and get to it. But I mean, Brendan and Zach have been fantastic. They're great co-hosts. Brendan is a coach. He plays, or he has played and does play still now. So he's got, a good grasp of the technical coaching and player side of hockey. Zach, I love Zach. He's just such a fan, but also he's a smart fan. Like, he knows, what the backgrounds, the analytics and all that stuff, but just comes at it with the same energy as like just your regular rabid fan. And then, I live on Evolving Hockey and all those websites. So I feel like it's a good trio, a good mix of people that come together and make that show. And, we're got a live show tomorrow. We got Johnny Lazarus on tomorrow, so that'll be fun. He's actually going to be our first official guest. I know they've had guests in the past. We've had guests in the past when I was with Forever Blue Shirts. So we've talked to Johnny before, but I don't think we've ever talked to anybody in the sense that where this team is at now, because they haven't been this bad in a long time. So we'll see.
Something I keep pointing to is like, I feel like we've seen this from the core before, and that's kind of what I've been riding. But I want to hear your take on the losing streak overall, because I think everybody's had a unique angle. You listen to either national media, to the region's outlets and reporters, but I want to hear your take on what you think about losing 5 of 6.
Yeah, I caught a lot of flack at the start of the year. I want to say like mid-October, end of October, maybe. You could see it coming from a mile away. Like, these games that they were playing were maybe not 6 of 7 bad, but like the games that they were playing, it felt like they were disinterested. They were, for a lack of a better term, lazy. That's what I've been saying a lot. It just feels like they're disinterested and lazy, and are resting on these laurels that we made the Eastern Conference Finals last year. We made it 2 years ago or 3 years ago now. We have a good enough team where we can just kind of coast through the regular season, and here we are. We'll show up in the playoffs and we'll turn it on then, because they won a President's Trophy last year. They went gung-ho all regular season, and it ended up in the same fate that they had 3 years ago. So it felt like they were kind of going through the motions. And I caught some flack for saying that, because, their record was 12-4-1, or it was this, and they were still winning games. But I said from the very jump of the season that wins and losses didn't matter as much to me as the process, because we've seen that this team is able to win games. We've seen that they've been able to come back from games. But For me, it was, is this team any different than what we've seen in the past? And from the jump, I mean, outside of right after that Florida game, I would say no, because you saw the exact same trends that bit them in the butt last year. They couldn't get the puck out of their own zone. They were lazy again, for lack of a better term, trying to get the puck out. They weren't quick with their passes. They weren't deliberate in the offensive zone. And granted, their offense hasn't been bad recently. It has been, just because you can't lose 6 of 7 and your offense be good the whole time. It's been the defense all year, and it's been the team defense. And I know, guys like Trouba, guys like Lindgren catch, all the strays, because when you think of defense, you think of defensemen, but it's the whole team from first line center all the way down to seventh defenseman. Their defense has not been good. I mean, off the rush, they're pitiful. In their own zone, they're god awful. I saw yesterday, Shesterkin's faced 150 inner slot shots this year. He's averaging like 13 a game over the last 7, which is just, I've had people, like, I don't know if they're just trying to get me going or not, but talk about Shesterkin and how, he's given up 4 a game at this point. If you look at the game, and if you look at where like these shots are coming from, you couldn't put Marty Brodeur would be giving up 4 a night with the team defense that the Rangers have had. But it's been a team for most of this season, outside of the first 6 or 7 games or so, that I was worried about. And when they were winning games in October, I was told, hey, listen, they're winning. Be grateful that they're at least winning. But there were so many signs that this team was in trouble, because it was the same thing. It was the same 5-on-5. 5-on-5 has been actually pretty good, which is a crazy thing to say based on the last 3 or 4 years where they've kind of gotten hemmed at 5-on-5. Their chances are mostly coming at 5-on-5, but in between those chances, it is 4, 5, 6 minutes of extended time in your defensive zone, because you can't clear it, or you can't set up a breakout, or you can't put a couple passes together and get into the zone. So there's a lot of issues. And I think it comes down to effort and accountability. That's kind of the 2 words that I've used all year. It doesn't feel like the veterans on this team are, how do I say this? It doesn't feel like that they are completely bought into what's going on. And that leads to you get called out in the media by your general manager, and that night you get pumped by St. Louis, who was a horrendous offensive team, and they hang 5 on you and put up 40 shots. And then you get pumped by Philly, and then you squeak out a game. In between that, you lose to Carolina. Then you get pumped by Philly. Then you squeak out a game, which you blow a lead and win in the final minutes against a bad Montreal team. And then you get the doors blown off of you by your rival in the Devils on home ice. So that's what frustrates me the most, is after getting called out, they're 1-3, and they've gotten their lunch taken to them 3 of the 4 games. And it's just, it's infuriating to watch, because you almost don't even have to anymore, because what's going to happen. The script. Like, it's the same thing every night. You're down 1-0 within the first 5 minutes. You're chasing the game, and then you give up one more goal, and it doesn't feel like they have the same. Like last year, it was 2-0, and you're like, all right, we've seen them come back from a lot before. We got them right where we want them. It feels like if you go down 1-0 at this point, like they're hopeless.
Yeah, and I mean, on Morning Cup Hockey yesterday, they were breaking down the first goal, and I think what's tough, in that New Jersey game, is that, like you just said, it's starting to feel like these things there's the macro issues, the things that are being talked about way in the atmosphere, and then there's the small things that are going on the ice in terms of details as well. I wanted to bring up to you something do you know Phil Kotcher?
I've heard, yeah.
He's like a fan. He's just pulls like all these quotes from articles, which I love. Because obviously in this day and age, it's kind of hard to pay for all the different paywalls and stuff. But he said that in Vince's latest word is that Miller and his agent Ian Polber, who also represented Barclay Goodrow may not be looking to do Chris Drury any favors and are driving a hard bargain. Now, obviously, Miller's part of that defense conversation. He's sub 25. What do you think? Like, obviously, we all know what happened with, the trade block conversation, and now it seems like maybe that's calmed down. But the names that are still peddled out there, Emily Kaplan mentioned Capo Caco. Now, Vince just mentioned how Miller and his agent are not looking, for any team friendly deal. Do you think there's going to be movement at this point? It feels like a very odd time to be saying on December 4th, like having these conversations 3 months ahead of the deadline.
Yeah, no, it's crazy, and especially if you look at like Miller's numbers from last year analytically compared to this year, he was one of the better defensemen in the league last year. And in 5 months, he's turned into a complete liability. And we don't know if that's physical, mental, it could be a whole plethora of different issues that has turned it this way. But the whole conversation is it's very hard to move anybody in the regular season, and especially guys like Trouba and Kreider, who were the two guys that were listed in that leak or whatever you want to call it to Elliot Friedman. And I've said this before, I don't think that was done on accident. I mean, very rarely do you hear things get leaked from this organization. They're very deliberate in how their news gets out. And it was no coincidence, at least to me, that the two guys that were mentioned in that were your captain and the guy who's played the most amount of games for this franchise and is, the heart leader of this team. That was, in my opinion, more of a message to the guys to wake the hell up. And, that hasn't happened since last Monday when that report got leaked. Then you got to start looking at guys where contracts are a little bit more movable, i.e. Capo Caco, who's not making a ton of money, Ryan Lindgren, who's not making a ton of money, Keandre Miller, who's not making a ton of money. But it doesn't feel like they're in a spot where if you're going to make these trades, you're selling. Like, you're not just going to go out there, make a trade, try and get draft picks. Like, it almost feels like they want players in return. And, there are hundreds of names that have been, thrown out there that the Rangers are going after. JT Miller, one of them. Obviously, Trevor Zegras for the last 5 years seems to be like a guy that people want on this organization. I don't buy it, but, it's just so hard to make a trade in the regular season, like a big name trade, just because guys don't have cap space. But you can make little deals, and Ryan Lindgren. You trade Ryan Lindgren, that just means you bring up a spot for Victor Mancini, and you in pen put Zach Jones's name in the lineup, which makes the team a little bit faster, a little bit quicker. Mancini's still an unknown. Like, he's been nice. Like, he's been a fun little surprise to start the year. Is he going to be like a defensive stalwart that's going to, stop players off the rush and be able to calmly get pucks out of the zone? We don't know. He might be. We just don't know because he hasn't played enough. Guys like Kako, I mean, if there was a time, and I feel like this would be a message that we're going in a retooling direction, because this is Kako's like highest trade value. He's been playing very well. Just got named to Team Finland for the Four Nations Cup. He is a guy that has taken some time to fully get into the league and feel like he belongs. And he's not playing at the level of a number 2 overall pick. And I think, we've shed that label on him, unfortunately, because you look at Jack Hughes and what he's done in the NHL in his career. But, Kako doesn't make a ton of money, so it's easy to move. Riley Smith doesn't make a ton of money, so he'd be easier to move. It's just, you can't make these like big time headlining deals unless another team's willing to do it. But you would also have to get guys in return for that. You can't just trade a $8 million, Kreider or Trouba to somebody and get nothing in return, because the other team can't fit that in. And the Rangers are not looking to fully, jump ship at the moment.
Yeah, the whole thing is very odd. And I guess I get that sense of, like you're saying, there's 1% of me that thinks at some point something could happen. I think it's very odd, though, to have, like, from Friedman on 32 Thoughts talked about how that group chat works with the general managers and how, there has to be validity to what Drury said, because he stated it to the other general managers in the league, so that means serious business. But at the same time, it's weird that things now have settled. We already knew 4 months ago, with all summer, it was about Jacob Trouba and how they couldn't move him because he wanted to stay. I think accountability is the word you hit on earlier too, where it feels like, even Fox post game against New Jersey is just not very convincing. They said, and it's like, uh, you know, I've seen a bunch of tweets of like the examples of what the players say, which is pretty funny too, because it seems very like, oh, it'll just like either it'll happen or, um, you know, oh, we just had let in too early. Accountability is a major factor. I think, it's weird because 2 weeks ago, I don't think if that trade like business open door sign is thrown around, I don't know if some of these things are as magnified as they would be. But I also want to hear your take on that because that's how I felt. Like, I don't think this would be gaining national attention. Like even Edmonton, the last 3 years, Edmonton will go like 2-9 in February and turn it around and make the playoffs. But it feels like this has been magnified to the upteenth because before this was about Igor's contract, and now it's about the whole trade conversation. So, I mean, do you think it would have been magnified like this if it weren't for what happened with the
I,
Chris Drury's kind of signal that they're open for business?
nationally, probably not. But at the same time, you then go into this stretch of losing 6 of 7. Then all of a sudden, there's a whole lot of questions that are being asked of a team that went to the Eastern Conference Final last year, won the President's Trophy. You can't just kind of hide losing 6 of 7 and not
Yeah.
have some questions. But I think for I can only speak for myself. I know before even that came up, there were we were talking about what the hell is wrong with this team, what's going on, and when you talk about accountability, I think it also goes to the management because if you're gonna go out into the media, and we don't know who ended up leaking this to Friedman or if it was Drury, if it was another GM, but if you're gonna have this open for business sign up, and I thought it was more of a play of, hey, let's go, let's get these guys going. I didn't think there was any thought they would actually trade somebody at that point. But,
Hmm.
if you're going to do that, you then get pumped on home ice. You then lose to Carolina. You then blow a lead against Montreal and win. And then you get pumped again on home ice against the Devils. What message are you sending then? Like, what message does that give if you're trying to get your guys going and they proceed to then lose 3 of 4 and, 2 of the 3 or 2 of the 4 are really not close games? Then it's time. And if obviously we're at Wednesday now. I said between the Devils game and their game on Friday, if something is not done, and let me say, Peter Laviolette's not the problem. We've had 3 coaches with this core now, and it's the same issues year in and year out. But
Hmm.
if the coach isn't fired, because unfortunately that just seems to be who the scapegoat is on any organization. If the coach isn't fired, if somebody isn't moved, sent down, traded, sat, something doesn't happen. I can't believe this group, this management group, because you can't just throw a threat out there. It's an empty threat at that point, because how the team responded to your threat was getting destroyed in 3 games. And
Hmm.
if your response to that is to do nothing and stay status quo, I, I don't know how we can get on board with the organization if that's what we're going to hold your players accountable to, and frankly not holding them accountable to, because you can't make that threat and then do nothing when they don't respond to it. That just feels wrong.
I have a question for context sake too. You seem pretty passionate about PL, at least in terms of hot seat conversation. Were you Where did you stand at the time that Gallant was fired?
I didn't like Gerard Gallant. I really didn't like him as a coach. I didn't think I it felt like in the past, he had a shelf life of 2 years with a lot of teams, with Florida, with Vegas. You kind of knew what you were getting with him, and there wasn't a whole lot of system that was brought in with the Rangers, and that was a huge thing when Laviolette came in. Is we're gonna put the system in place. You're gonna play a lot more structured instead of these young guys just kind of running around, and it worked. And I think the 2022 team, I love that team to death because I thought they were too stupid to understand what the hell was going on. Like they were just kind of enjoying the moment and playing in the moment and having fun. And that's the other thing that I've noticed with this group is it just feels like they're not having fun. Like it feels like they're working a regular 9-to-5 job, and it's painful to watch. Even when they score, there's no excitement that happens, and it's different than from years past. But with Laviolette, he has a track record of being a very good coach, staying in a spot. He's won a Stanley Cup. Like he has this track record of him being successful. So, in this instance, and we've seen it in history with this core, they've gotten Quinn fired, they've gotten Gallant fired, and they've, probably at some point this year are going to get Laviolette fired, whether it's middle of the year or end of the year. You can't keep blaming the coach. You can't just keep pointing your finger at the coach. At some point, you got to turn it around and point it on yourself, because 3 coaches can't all be wrong. 3 National Hockey League coaches can't all not be able to win games with this core that you have that is supposed to be, of the elite caliber. I love Mika Zibanejad. Right now, I don't know what's happening with him. Since Lafreniere signed, he hasn't done much. Fox is an interesting one because he's playing with 2 pylons at the moment, whoever he gets paired with, defensively at least. So he is having to try and bail out, play 2 positions at one time. And unfortunately, it turns into him looking bad because the other guy's out of position, whether that be Lindgren or whether that be Keandre Miller. But I think I feel like it's the consensus as well among a lot of the fans is like Laviolette's not the issue. He's going to end up falling for this just because you can't make a trade with the way the cap is structured to get a team going. And it's almost like you have to fire the coach. But I mean, man, he's not the, who are you going to hire if you do fire him?
Now, the only thing I'll say, I love it. I adore playing devil's advocate just because conversation. Because I agree with you, but I think there would be pushback in the sense of, well, the conversation when he came in, and I vividly recall, like every single day of training camp last year, the question was, when was the 1-3-1 going to be implemented in a game? Although I respect and share the same opinion, don't you think that he also is liable for how messy they're playing? Like, at what point is it reined in? Because this is not what the team looked like to start last year, or at least in the stretch where they were really the best team in the National Hockey League.
Yeah, no, this is the worst stretch we've seen this core since 2018-19 season. It was the last time they lost 5 in a row in regulation was 2018-19. And yeah, I understand what you're saying. And I'm actually like Brendan on our show, it was either last week or 2 weeks ago, made a really good point about that with this system that he's brought in to implement with this group. It's almost like you can't, if you're spending all this time in your defensive zone and you're just flipping pucks out and, the guys themselves can't get the job done, they can't execute in that regard. It's hard to set up a system because you're never on the forecheck. You're never going forward with the puck. You're trying to survive in your own zone. You're getting it out. You're changing. Then the puck's back in your own zone. You're trying to get it out, and you flip it out, and you're changing. And then you bring it up for one rush. You take 2 shots, and then you turn around and go play defense off the rush. It's very hard. And I think it'd be very interested to hear from, Laviolette or somebody on the team in the coming days about, this stretch. And do they feel like it's more an execution problem or an effort problem? Because, I feel like everybody's got their own opinion on it. Obviously, none of us are in the locker room, so we don't know what's going on. But, it almost feels like it's a little bit of effort, a little bit of execution. And the effort part, obviously lands on the coach to a degree, but it also lands on the leadership group. And I've said this a couple weeks ago, your captain's a foot out the door. It's very hard to get leadership from a guy that knows he's not going to be here at the end of the year.
Yeah.
Kreider's missed some times. Zibanejad's a soft-spoken guy. Fox is a soft-spoken guy. It's almost time for these guys like Hedel, who it's tough because he's hurt a lot, but Lafreniere, Schneider, these younger group of guys to start using a voice. And again, it's so hard to say that because you're not in the locker room. You don't know what's happening, but it almost feels like a changing of the guard. And right now it's a very messy changing of the guard. But I think the leadership goes on, or the effort, goes on to the leadership, which is both coaching and the, veterans of the team. And I've seen enough of the veterans on the team to know that, 2.5 coaches have been fired at this point. Laviolette's kind of out the door at the moment. So, again, I know I'm repeating myself, but you can't keep pointing the finger at the coach if you're doing the same thing year in and year out and it's not working. But I understand what you're saying in that, the coach is brought in to fix all that, and if he can't fix all that, then he's useless. But we'll see. We'll see what happens.
I share the same opinion. Even in the sense that Game 4 against New Jersey, Gallant has that massive blowout with Drury, and it seemed like the writing was on the wall. Obviously, because they dropped Game 3 in overtime and then get smoked in Game 4, and that completely changed that series. And the year that they essentially, Drury kind of assembled a super team. But even at that time, again, I know you're watching every game, same as I am. Like, at that time, there were losses before that were pressing the issue of what Drury was going to do at that deadline, because before that, they had a really tough end of 2022 calendar year. Helmet throw, that whole thing.
Yeah.
So I think we've seen it from this group before. Frankly, even at the end of Quinn's time, for all the vices of Gallant and then also Quinn before him, I think, as you mentioned, I feel that way about the core as well, because we saw you win, it was like 3 or 4 games and they make the playoffs. They lose to the Islanders once, they lose to them again the second time, even worse. Then the Tom Wilson incident happens, they show kind of no fight. And that was what got JD, Gorton, and Quinn, all the three-headed serpent, cut off. So I do think obviously they're looking for quick results because they believe in this group, but like you said, I also think the results certainly haven't been there from the core overall. I have one more question for you because you said you're a stats guy. Is there a underlying stat that is spoken to you or that you just point to whenever there's any of these conversations about how poorly they're playing?
It's the slot shots easily. I mean, it's 150 he's faced this season, Shesterkin, 13 a game. And I don't want to misquote this, but I'm almost positive the next highest team was like 85. So
okay,
it doesn't seem right, but I don't want to put any fake news out there. But either way, they lead the league in inner slot shots, and Shesterkin leads the league in facing inner slot shots. And I got in this debate with our sports director yesterday, and he was sort of on my side about it. If revisionist history, but if you look at a guy like Marty Brodeur, why was he so good in his career? Because he faced 12, 13, 14 shots a night. You can only be so good. I don't care how good of a goaltender you are. You can be Marty Brodeur, but if you're facing 40 a night and 15 of them are in the house, basically, you got no chance. Like, you have no chance. And Shesterkin, if he wasn't looking for $12 million right now and didn't have this contract negotiation to start the year, I feel like we would all be a lot more sympathetic with him in that this guy's just getting thrown to the wolves night in and night out. But it feels like most of the conversation is, you want $12 million? Stop the freaking puck. Which just can't be the case. It can't be the case. And I've heard from other people, obviously they're sitting here like, why the hell would he sign now? Like, why would Shesterkin sign in an environment where he's not getting set up to win, which I completely understand and would agree with if he decided to go somewhere else, which is also a product of the Rangers not being able to get it done in the offseason when they had a chance to do it. But if there's an underlying stat, it's that. Like, their offense, I mentioned this a little bit earlier. Their 5-on-5 offense has been one of the best in the league. They're not getting a ton of quantity in that regard, but their quality is really good. Which is a ludicrous thing to say with this core, because their whole last 3 years is they feast on the power play and get caved in on 5-on-5. They're still getting caved in at 5-on-5, but they're generating more offensively in that regard. They can't score on the power play. That's another issue now, but there's a lot of things to point at. But if you want to kind of hammer down one thing and why they're giving up 3, 4, 5 goals a night, you can't give up that many high danger opportunities and expect to stay in games. And that's on your defense, team defense, from forwards all the way down to your defensemen. And every now and then your goaltender needs to make a save, which, I can't throw it on him fully, but you don't lose 6 of 7 if one part of your game is good. It's all bad at the moment.
Yeah, the one thing you mentioned, the power play, which is I felt like that was a little bit evident last year, as the team got better down the stretch. Now, I don't have the numbers, so this is really just purely off the top. I think when they started to miss Zibanejad in that one-timer spot, like he really wasn't scoring, it felt like things started to falter a little bit. They didn't really generate a lot in, I guess, against Florida in the conference final. At least, again, I don't have the numbers in front of me. And then the one thing that stands out the most to me right now, which is like clinging on for dear life, is that their penalty kill is the number one in the NHL, which is absurd considering their circumstance the last 2 weeks. But
yeah, it almost feels like, and I got to give credit to Brendan again. He mentioned it on one of our last shows. It's like they defend on the penalty kill because they're forced to, because you're down a man, because you start in the D zone, and it's an automatic defense first. But it just doesn't feel like when they're playing 5-on-5 that's the case. And even 5-on-4, how many chances are they giving up shorthanded at the moment? When the other team is shorthanded, like it just.
mhm.
It's just there's so many issues team defense wise that I've don't get me wrong. I have the Madison Square Garden tattooed on my arm. Like, I'm going to watch this team. Like, I love this team. I want them to be good, but right now it's so hard to watch these games because what's going to happen before it happens. If they're playing a good team, they're going to get their show run. If they're playing a bad team, they're going to struggle. They might win, but they're going to struggle. And by the way, I've talked about it as well. Their end of December schedule is brutal. They have to play 6 of 7 on the road. They got to play at Dallas. They got to play at St. Louis. They got to back-to-back with Carolina and New Jersey. They got to go on the road to Florida and on the road to Tampa Bay. And they got to go to Nashville, which I know Nashville is not good, but they have talent on that team. So those are 7 games. Like I'm sitting here like they have to turn it around at some point. But then I look at the end of the month and I'm like, you could lose 7 in a row there too. And at that point, your season's over. If you have a stretch of 14 games or 15 games where you lose 14 of them, I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. My hands are in the air. It's such a weird year that I didn't expect them to be as good as they were last year. I expected them to compete for the division, but to see what it's turned into over the last 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks of the year, I don't know. I'm almost at a loss for words. I've gone on my rants on our show, and I've started to be more of a retrospective person what I've been seeing and not get so frustrated, just because now you know what you're going to see. It's not a surprise because it's not a an anomaly that this is happening. It's now a trend that it's happening, and that becomes it's almost like you accept the defeat. It's like the 7 stages of grief or whatever it is. You're just at the acceptance part of it.
Well, I think this serves us all as a pleasant reminder that the NHL is a vicious league. No matter what team you're playing, they have a chance to win, unless maybe you're in that bottom 2, Chicago. But even San Jose's found a way to win some games. It, I think it harkens to that St. Louis game on the road last year with the Jordan Kyrou hat trick. That was when the team was on a losing streak. Igor wasn't playing well through January, and that kind of capped it off. They went to Vegas and lost. They went to St. Louis. That was the okay, this is the team we bounced back in against in 22, 23. We'll do it again just on the road. And it goes to show every team's got talent and every team can beat you. So, on a more positive note, Steve, again, New York Rangers radio, tune in. Love the live shows. And yeah, any last words?
Yeah, no, tomorrow with Johnny Lazarus. I don't know exactly how long I'm going to be on it. I'm going to be in Buffalo tomorrow for the Sabres game, but um, either way, I mean, Johnny's a great guest. You know him, obviously, you know him very well, but he's a great dude around the team a lot, very good, knowledgeable person. So tune in, and we got some guests that we're trying to get on in the future. We've got some talks with people, so it should be fun. Hopefully, we'll have better things to talk about, and if not, let's at least have the memes be good this year, because I feel like that's the best part of losing is you get to dunk on your own team, and at least it's funny. I'm a Jets fan. Like, I've had 13 years of being the
Oh,
worst team in football. So
misery.
yeah, it's fun at this point.
All right. Well, Steve, listen, I look forward to having you on in the future and hopefully again in better times.
Yeah.
So I'll keep in touch. And yeah, for everyone tuning in or listening after the fact, tune in to New York Rangers Radio. Thanks for coming on, Steve.
See you guys.